We're back. So good afternoon. I think you've met Dr. Abali and myself. We're going to talk about building an effective co-authorship team and also talk about some of the challenges that can occur in the situation. So I'll let Dr. Abali take it away.
Yeah, so I think authorship is so important. It is one of the most important accomplishments that we have as academicians, to show our publications and what our roles in those publications. So I think this session and the next session with the citations are very important way of showing what we are doing and our role in those authorships. So today we're going to discuss what is a author is, the contributor, reviewer, and then we're going to compare and contrast the lead author, middle authors, and last authors. And some of these terms may have other names that I would try to introduce to you. And then we're going to discuss managing difficult and co-authorship situations. I have had one of those in during my career, and list strategies to help co-authors work effectively. I hope this is going to be a session in which we can interact and it will be an engaging. Before we move to have Dr. Williams to move to her talk, I would like to show you what I mean is that it's a journey, and I will show you samples of my journey that allow me to be in all of those situations that I have been. So there is a committee which is called International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, ICMJE, and it has developed 4 criteria for authors. Those criteria are scholarship, authorship, approval, and agreement. So a scholarship is going to be a substantial work that you are going to design and implement and collect the data, and it's going to be a unique work that is going to contribute to the publications that are out there. It will either build on top of what they're doing, or it's going to be something new that you have come up with to search for, to look into. So once you do that scholarship or scholarly work, then you can then start to draft the manuscript and revise it. And all the authors usually participate in revising it critically for, again, to be an intellectual content that will be an addition to the already published data on that topic. Once you have written your manuscript, then you send it for publication, and you choose a journal that best fit to your publication. And you have to have kind of their approval for the publication. And you also have you have to have the approval of all the co-authors on that paper before you send that paper for publication. And you have to have an agreement among the co-authors that the question that you are asking for and the way that you addressed it, it's accurate, and there is no plagiarism, and the citations are accurate, and the data and the speculation from your data that you have received and that you come up with maybe new thesis are accurate and to your best knowledge or to your best expertise, and that needs to be agreed upon by all of the co-authors on that paper. Next. So if you go to ICMJE, then you would see that there are recommendations for conducting, reporting, editing, and publication of scholarly work in medical journals. And if you look at the Roman numeral number 2, it says roles and responsibilities of authors, contributions, reviewers, editors, publishers, and owners. And if you go to subtitle A, it says defining the role of authors and contributors. So I would suggest that you take a look at this document on your own. It's downloadable. So if you go to ICMJE site, you will find this document. So now we will go and dwell on more of the roles of various roles of in a paper. And the lead author, it's also called, at least in science world, the first author. And the first author is going to be the responsible for overall content, and it will be the person who puts the first draft of the manuscript, and she's going to, or he's going to be then incorporate the revisions that once you submit it to a journal and comes back, that you incorporate those, you write the rebuttal for that manuscript to tell them that you either did what they have asked you, or if you didn't do it, why you thought that it wouldn't be necessary to do it, and explain it. So you are in charge of every part of the manuscript as the lead author. And again, you need to have an understanding that you need to have approval by every person on the paper, and you take the ownership of the submission. So sometimes the lead author will be also the last author or the corresponding author, but it depends on the situations. And I will give you some examples from my experience to give you context to this lead author and what is last author, which is the corresponding author, at least in sciences. And the lead author usually is the very first author that you would see on that paper again. Next slide. So everybody on that paper is a co-author, and they all have made a significant contribution to the work, and their contribution may be in variety of ways. So they can be they should have substantial contribution to the conception and the design of the work, or the interpretation, or the collecting of the data, or the analysis of the data. So nowadays we have very different expertise, but we collaborate with many other disciplines. So they may not be doing everything in that paper, but they contribute in a different way that puts everything together. And when the paper comes back, they need to work on it and help you to revise it. And even before we send it, the first draft usually gets many revisions before submission, so that they are an important part of that work. And the most important contribution for an authorship is that you intellectually participate. There are people who will do the work for you for a paper or for a manuscript or research, but they're not really intellectually participating, and they may be paid for what they're doing, and they may not be a co-author. They are going to be contributor that we will discuss in a minute, So you can acknowledge them, but they don't have to be on a paper, on the co-author list. And many journals now, when you submit, you have to write every person's role in that research and describe it so that they know what kind of co-authorship you have been supplemented to that research. So this is in many journals nowadays. And once the co-author, we need to have the approval from the co-authors of the version that is published. So when you submit a paper, all the authors will get a notification that this paper is published. And some of them will say that you acknowledge that everybody has seen the last version of the manuscript that you submitted. So it differs a little bit from journal to journal, but these are usually what has been asked from the lead author to provide the information about the co-author, that they have their final approval and that they have intellectually provided input to this paper. And a co-author is going to be accountable for all aspects of the work, and they need to at least answer the question about the accuracy and integrity of the work. They may not be able to have the expertise, all the expertise to discuss about the paper, because maybe they have just done the analysis of the work, but their expertise do not lie in that subject. So they are accountable, but with interprofessional work that we do nowadays, everybody bring different expertise to the table, and at least they need to be accountable for the part that they have worked on. Next. So we are still talking about the co-authors, and there should be an agreement at the beginning, and I think Dr. Williams will talk about it more, that who is going to be the lead or the corresponding author, and that this communication will be led by the corresponding author or the lead author on behalf of the co-authors. And this will include the submission. This is going to be the peer review process. Valerie?
So it's for that. Is it like, should we expect to be hearing a lot from, I don't know, random people across the country or the world that have questions about this subject area? Like, how much of a commitment is it to say that you're going to be the corresponding author?
You almost do all the work. It's your work. I mean, for example, when I was a graduate student, I was the first author, but not the corresponding author, because my advisor, my thesis advisor, had a big grant, and it was part of that big grant that I was working, and I always had very every week meeting with him. We will be back and forth like a ping pong game. So he would be the corresponding author. He will be the last author. That's how it is in a science paper. And I would be the first author on those papers. But there are certain instances that I am the lead and the corresponding author because it was my idea. I wrote the paper, but I had a lot of people who helped me with that. So I have been both the lead and the corresponding author in some cases. Does that explain you, Valerie?
Yes. In that case, you have your name as the first, and then where it says corresponding author, you put your name. Is that right?
Yeah. So whenever you submit a paper, you have to put an asterisk or something to show who will be the corresponding author. Because in medical education and education, usually you will have the corresponding author first. Like my sister is in education, and in her papers, she's the first author. Even she is advising to her students, and then the students come later. In my case, the first author is the student who drives it, the project, and the last author is the corresponding author. So the co-authors could be statistician again. It could be database manager, study coordinator, student supervisor. So for example, when I was a student, I had my advisor. He was a big guy, very, very busy guy. So we have the ideas, but he couldn't come and teach me things into the lab. He wouldn't be able to teach me the techniques that I need to do those things. So I had an additional supervisor, and he would be my second author on that paper because he taught me. So you can have supervisors as well. So there may be various roles, and we will talk about a statistician. Maybe your statistician may not need to be as a co-author, but maybe a contributor, because sometimes you will just give them the data and they will analyze and they will give it to you. It's their paid job. It's the same thing with the technician in a lab. They do some techniques and they do it all the time. They don't have any intellectual input to what you're doing. So sometimes those areas are gray. So there are some super technicians who really get invested in the project. They really contribute into the project, and then they deserve to be a co-author. Any other questions? Okay, so moving on. So the senior author or the corresponding author is going to be the person who conceive the data. Sometimes you conceive it together, like a student and a boss, but they have major contribution. At least they also support you with this work that you're doing. And they design the study and obtain a fund. I think this is very important, that they have the funding and they brought you in as a person to help them, but you can grow sometimes relationships so that you are the lead author, like I tell you, Valerie, but you are not the senior author. And the difference is then it's the fund and the supervisory role. So I can have idea, I can bring him new ideas as a student or a postdoc, but I am still growing in my expertise. So he still play a major role in supervisory role and advising role, that my ideas are good and give me the permission to try them. So a senior author is going to have supervisory role. It will, they are most of the time funded, and the conceiving the idea and deciding the idea sometimes will be together. So again, these are the things that you need to really discuss with from the beginning with your team that you put together, who will be doing what, and there is no problem later on. The next slide. So the contributor. So the contributor, it could be a friend of mine or my sister, for example, that I write a paper and I send her, can you give me what you think about the paper? But I don't put her name. If she spends so much time on it, then I will acknowledge her at the end of the paper. or they provide you new information. For example, just like I told you, they give you some data, qualitative or quantitative data. Or for example, when I was doing research, they would give me an antibody that is not actually commercially available to do my research. Then I will acknowledge them as a contributor, because without them, I wouldn't be able to publish my work, giving me that reagent. But it could be a quote or a photo that a contributor gives you. So then you need to acknowledge them again, and they will be a contributor. Or it could be a person, maybe it will be an English major student who would read your paper and give you technical editing. I think for those of you who are a second language like me, maybe you would like to show it to someone else to just take a look at it, because it's very important that your work is very polished when you send it for publication. And they can provide you feedback on your article or suggest improvements. Again, that may be your next door colleague who is expert in that area, but you're just giving the paper again for improvements or for their feedback, and you acknowledge them. So those are going to be contributors, but they are not intellectually giving you ideas to your research to earn a co-authorship. So there are various ways that you will have contributors who will be important for your papers, but they're not going to be co-authors. Next. So the reviewers, these are people who can review your paper, and these are going to be reviewers on the once you submit your paper, who would review the article and provide feedback. So for MEDET portal, for example, Dr. Sanchez is associate editor like me, and you met Sarah Hunt yesterday. She goes through the papers. They decide if it's valuable enough for this publication to go through MEDET portal review. So she does that. Once she does that, then they identify reviewers who have the right expertise to review. Those reviewers look at those papers and provide suggestions. And then it comes to Dr. Sanchez or me in my field. And then once we accumulate that, we send it to the editor. So there is a stepwise process even for reviewing to really have a very thorough review of the paper to decide whether to publish it, whether it's a great work but needs to be reviewed and then resubmitted. So those are going to be your external reviews after submission, but you can have internal reviewers. There are some schools in which they have grant offices. You can send them your article to look at your submission and to give you provide you some feedback before you submit it. So these are all of your allies that you should use when you are getting ready for a manuscript and when you are writing it together. Next slide. Okay, so I will stop here and give you, if you want, if I can share now, Renee, to show this everyone like my journey to the and that it takes different forms of. Can you see it?
Yes, it's there you go. Yep.
Okay, so these are samples that I thought that it may be helpful. It shows how I went through this process, and there are sample things. So these are my, I was a first author, lead author. This is were my advisor he was the last author, corresponding author. He was my supervisor. It's always good not to stick with one work. It shows that I was a person who had expertise, and I participated in another research while I was doing this research, and my name was somewhere in between. So they give you the credit for authorship. The same thing here. And then when I came back, I had a mandatory obligation to go back to my country. I came back and I became an assistant professor. Then, and I collaborated with my advisor. So my name was here, and I was a corresponding author. There were instances that both Dr. Bertino and we were corresponding authors together. So there are instances that you can do that as well, that you and your two-person can be the co-author of the lead author, and you two-person can be the corresponding author. Then I moved into medical education. All of this that I show you were science papers. Then on this one, I was both the first author and also the corresponding author. Again, this was the same thing. In other projects, I helped with the projects, but I wasn't the main person. So it can be different from situation to situation. But these papers that you publish tell a story about you, your expertise. So it's very important. And when we talk about citations, you would know that when my work get acceptance, when I'm get cited. So that citation is very important, that we will talk with Dr. Prang when we come back to that next talk. Alhevis?
Yes, I have a question. Sometimes I see where there are articles that says the first two authors contributed equally to this work. Mm-hmm. How do you decide who's the first author in that case, since that's considered the lead author?
In my case, I have done those things too. I was doing a lot of work, but there was another person who did really a lot of work. So my name was first, but in her CV, she could put her name first. So that's the beauty of it. If you put it, even my name is first, she can list on her CV as the first author. So that's how we got around that.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen that also happen, where you have two co-first authors and someone just on their own CVs put their name first. Sometimes in the actual journals, they're listed in alphabetical order. So next, I'm going to give some scenarios. So when you look at author orders, you have the first or lead, and then you have second, third, fourth, fifth, senior, or anchor author. And again, usually it's listed in degree of participation. And you've seen some papers that have like 27 authors on there. And generally the first and the last spots are where people really look at. The second author can also do some contribute, but essentially speaking, hold on, I'm seeing something in the chat. It says, Dr. Bali says, welcome. You're going to list the author in order of degree of participation. So the next thing I'm going to talk about, we're going to have some scenarios, and this is going to be a group discussion. How would you handle these particular situations? And these are all real situations that occurred. And it's a way to kind of get around how, co-authorship issues. So here's a situation number one. One faculty member has an idea, but another faculty member supervised and implemented the project. At the end of the project, the faculty member who had the original idea insists on being the senior author or the anchor author, last author, which is a spot of prominence, while the faculty member who supervised gets middle authorship. How would you handle that situation? So before at the end of the project, so you have someone has an idea, but the other person does a lot of work, and the person who had the initial idea wants to be the lead author, the senior author, the anchor author. How would you handle that situation?
Often the person who comes up with the research question, at least in my own discipline, is credited with first author status.
Go ahead. So if they just did the research question and nothing else, like if they didn't do any of the work or didn't write the paper?
Well, they would supervise the implementation, but on the assumption that the work would not have taken place without the original research question, they would get first authorship.
Interesting. M&A?
I think they can have co-authorship as the lead, corresponding author, or the person who supervised is the co-author for the lead position. So either first as co-author or last as two corresponding author. That could be a good compromise, because the second person did a lot of work, so took the idea to come to fruition. So that's what I would come up with a solution, maybe.
Yes. So I'll give you more background. So, sorry, that actually happened. This is my situation. I had a situation when my colleagues came to me and said, so something about me as a personality is I'm a doer, I get things done. And I had a colleague who had an idea, and I was like, and he asked me to kind of come in with it on it. And essentially I got together the house staff and I supervised everything going forward, where he had minimal interaction, meaning I would meet with the residents every couple of weeks. We went over the data, we analyzed the data, and I actually was very involved in writing up the paper. And it took a lot of time and effort, and we actually got accepted to one of our top 5 journals, which is a big deal. And when time came for authorship, he was like, well, it's my idea, I should be the senior author. And in my head, I was like, well, you didn't do anything. He did have the idea, but in terms of the time and effort it took to actually meet with the house staff, because this was something that came, we worked with residents on as a quality improvement project. It was me who met with them on a regular basis. I'm the one who actually did the work. We went through like 1,500 patients and things like that. And I felt that I should have been the lead author or senior author, because I supervised everything hands-on, and his interaction was actually quite minimal, to the point that anytime there was an issue or problem with the project, I was the person that got pulled into it. This particular colleague of mine is someone who has great ideas, but I've just felt that doesn't really. And we've actually been on other projects where I'm like, okay, it's your idea, we're working together, I'm just not doing anything, and nothing's moved forward. So and in terms of authorship, I didn't feel right telling the resident who wrote the paper that I should be first author, because she wrote the paper. I kind of walked her through writing it, and then the fellow, I'm a gastroenterologist, the fellow who also applied for a grant for this got the grant. I said they should be second author. So I didn't feel right moving them out of those 2 spots, because I felt like, they did the work, they should do it. So in the end, I just kind of acquiesced and said, fine, I was a corresponding author in that case as a 3rd spot, but that's what happened. So that's the situation, to give you more background. I felt that in that case, I should have been the lead author, because I put a lot of work into it. And that's for someone who's looking to go to associate professorship, this is an important metric. That's important. Interestingly enough, we had another situation where I worked with the same person again. He did the same thing again. And at that time I said, you know what, I'm taking the senior author spot, because I said, honestly, I did most of the work. And in that case, he acquiesced. And we had I worked on another project with him. And essentially what I realized a pattern was forming. Like, he'd be like, I think this is a good idea. You want to work with me on this? I'm like, sure. And then I'll just run with it and do all the work. And at that point in time, I realized that this might not be a good co-relationship, because I'm like, there's another project that went through a situation. He was kind of like, listen, how come you didn't put me as a co-author? I was like, well, what did you do? I just said that to him. I was like, what have you done? Yeah. And I shut him up. At that point, I was like, what have you done? And he was like, okay. So what I did in the first situation is I kind of acquiesced. But in retrospect, I should have, I think Emily's idea to being co-first authors make a good idea, because you can do co-first authors. Anyone else? What would you do in this situation? I'll say, I folded like a pair of cards, but.
Renee, I think the person with the idea, if she didn't come to all those meetings and contribute, then I think it's a different situation. And I think it's very important discussion, so that if there is something like that, you guys can talk with them. Okay, you have the idea, but you're not going to bring it fruition. Would you mind to? I will be leading this search um, with your agreement. You will be a co-author, but I'm going to be the lead author. At the very beginning, because it's not fair that we just talk, we have ideas, but if those ideas is not patented, if it's not bring to the fruition, it would die off. So yeah, it's unfortunate that happened to you.
I learned a good lesson. Ed, you have your hand up,
Yeah.
your virtual hand up.
I agree very much with your sense that you should have been in charge of that. And I think that Dr. Abelli just made the point that I wanted to add to this, which is that it really is important to try to get everybody from the beginning on board with who's going to have what role with the publication when it finally happens. Once you get to the time that all the data is there and the manuscript, in your case, it sounds like the manuscript was also even written before that agreement was reached. And I think you got treated very poorly. The one bit of justice I see in that is that this person who could have been involved with you on some excellent papers in the future shot himself in the foot and won't do that.
Yes. Thank you. So interestingly enough, as I said, I recognize that, we were on multiple projects together, and I didn't let the other projects go, but I didn't drive them forward. And I figured if it's your idea, then you should drive it forward. And they've kind of been like, lifting in the wind for the last couple of years. I'll give you another example. So interestingly enough, I'll tell you how. So this same person came to me. He worked with a group of PhDs. I love PhDs. A couple of you are on the calls. You guys are very productive. You publish papers a lot. You get grants. He was working with a group, one of our population health, and they had worked with him for 8 months trying to get into the patient population at my hospital. And he worked at my hospital at the time. He's now in a different hospital, but same department. And he pulled me into that. And I came in. I worked very successfully with this group again, because I said I'm someone who gets things done. And at the end of it, the group actually offered to make me a co-investigator on an NIU grant that they applied for NIH, and they got it. So I got some funding off of that. So it actually turned out very well, because again, I came in and they had been working with him for 8 months. And then as soon as I got involved, I got, things moved forward a little bit differently. And at the end, they were like, we're going to apply for a U grant. We want to put you as a not a high percentage, but like 3% funded from this U grant, which of course helped me when I applied for associate professorship. And again, it puts me as an NIH funded researcher. Even though I'm a clinician educator, that's still a very important metric for promotion. It goes on my CV. So in the end, because of how I worked, and they kind of like just forgot about him, because again, he talks, but not much moves afterwards. My mentor calls it Brownian motion. And that stays within the context of this little group here, because you never know who's listening in. But that's something I learned. I think to Ed's point, if you're going to do a project early on, figure out the authorship order, and also figure out who's going to do what, because otherwise it becomes a little bit of an issue at the end. And that's the lesson I learned very early on. This is a situation. Go ahead.
May I add something? And sometimes the order will change even you establish the order. Like I am now in a project with it involves many other schools. And at the beginning, I was able to put a lot of time. Now I am extremely busy, and either I will have a minor contribution, or I will pull out myself, because I was even thinking to have a co-authorship with these things, and life happens sometimes, and the integrity of research is important. So sometimes you have to make decision. Can I do this and do it? And if you cannot, pull it away, and there will be another time for you to be involved in that project or in another project.
Another area that you can get, I think, co-authorship. Again, you can join national society. So sometimes committees will write papers, and because you're on that committee, you'll be on that paper. Now, interestingly enough, that happened to me with one of our training committees for one of our societies. And when I realized my name was on the paper, I kind of said, "Hey guys, I don't feel comfortable being on this paper. I didn't really do much with it." And the guy was like, "Renee, you're on the committee." But we all had to review the paper for content at the end. But I had just joined and I felt kind of weird. I was like, I don't think I should be on this paper because I really didn't do anything with it. But as a result of being on that committee, everyone gets listed as a co-author. They have main authors who write the paper and do the research, but then you as a committee member will review the paper for content, edit it, things like that. So that's a space where I've actually gotten some publications, but my extent is reviewing the papers for grammar, reviewing the papers and editing it, and which I do now because I'm like, that's the best way I can contribute because I'm like a middle author. There's like 15 of us on the paper. I'm like author number 13, which is not really a prominent place, but just other ways. But it definitely builds upon my work in terms of like education, just FYI. This happened to my mentee. A resident implements a project, does a bulk of the work. Hold on. And writing, and gets told by the supervising faculty that they will be a middle author while a fellow who didn't contribute as much will be the first author. So one of my mentees, she was a resident planning to apply for GI fellowship. She worked with one of our fellows on a project that got published in a strong journal. It was specifically, I think, I forgot the name, but she came to me one day and she's like, I just got told by Dr. So-and-so that your fellow is going to be the first author. And I'm not, and I'm the one that wrote the paper and did everything. How would you handle that situation?
I would probably go talk to the fellow and be like, hey, like, we both know who wrote this. But it's very not fun conversations to have.
That's one way. What else can you do? Any other let's see. I don't see everyone on my screen. Anyone else?
Having a conversation with the supervising faculty, maybe they may not be aware on the extent at which the resident or the fellow were involved in the project itself.
That's exactly what happened. So my mentee came to me and I said, "Why don't you talk to Dr. So-and-so? Just let her know what happened." And she did, and she spoke to the supervising faculty member, and she said that she didn't know. She didn't realize that the resident had been the one doing the bulk of the work. And so she was like, okay, that makes sense. And then when she spoke to the fellow agreed. He was like, listen, I didn't really do much on this. It was really Tracy that did most of the work. So when it got published, she got her first authorship spot. And if you're looking to apply for something like gastroenterology, which is very competitive, publications become very important. Wherever you are on the publication list is fine, but if you're a first author, that does count for something significant. So in this case, the supervising faculty was unaware that she had done the bulk of the work and she actually wrote most of the paper. But luckily for her, the attending was okay to switch things around. And the fellow was very honest and said, yes, she's right. She did do most of the work. Here, this is not mine. It's a friend. This happened to a friend of mine. A senior faculty member insists on being moved higher on the authorship list, even though they minimally contributed to the project. Any? They want to be second author.
That's basically an ethical issue that I think needs to be addressed with the senior faculty member. And it may be appropriate to go and speak with one of, you can seek someone from, help from someone in academic personnel as a consultant on this. But it's something that's unethical. It's something that happens far too often, and it probably happens more often for underrepresented folks than it does for anybody else. But you do have your rights, and those should be respected.
Yes, that does happen. So all these situations involve faculty members or residents who are from UIM groups.
Something happened to me because you said, Renee, how important it is for the residents to have publications. And I was a graduate student, and there was a resident there, and he was working on the project, but I put a lot of time in it. So it was my project, but he said that it's very important for him for his next step, and that I will have many other opportunities to be the first author. And that really made me extremely upset. I went and talked with my supervisor, and I talked with him as well too. I remained the first author. I know other people who put their spouses or their significant other on the paper. It is very unethical if they did not really contribute intellectually to that paper. So it happens a lot, unfortunately.
Yes, important to note. So I think those are things to think about.
Dr. Williams, if you can close out on the session.
All right.
Thank you.
So essentially, strategies going forward is make sure you establish your author order prior to writing the paper. It does avoid subsequent conflict. Again, that can change depending on how things evolve, but you have to have that discussion up front because it gets really uncomfortable later on. You want to resolve any conflicts earlier. You want to divide up your writing appropriately. Bulk of the writing should be the lead authors, but co-authors can also write certain sections. So I'll say the second author can write the materials or methods, because remember, you have intro, material, methods, results, and discussion. So it's okay to have someone write the statistical analysis section, write the results section, have someone else write, the method section, and then you do the intro and the discussion. It's okay to split the work up because you don't have to write the entire thing yourself. Make sure you have an internal review who can look at your work and actually see and give you back feedback. Consider submitting to a high impact journal that you might not get into, only because they can give you good feedback to improve your paper. And if your article is returned with no review, meaning you just get it back and no edits, just submit to the next journal. If your article is returned without any review comments, it means that it did not go out to reviewers and they didn't even look at it. So just send it to the next, don't make any edits, send it to the next journal. So again, similar to our prior presentation, remember you're not alone. Yeah, this is interesting. This slide looks very familiar. So we'll say thank you for ending.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Williams and Dr. Abali. We're going to, in the interest of time, we're going to just move into the next session, if that's okay. The next session is by Dr. Pang and Dr. Abali. So Dr. Abali or Dr. Pang, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the slides. Right, yes. As they're doing that, please, if you have not sent an ESR worksheet to me, if you have not told me which project you're going to be working on, please do so. I'm still missing from 2 individuals. I texted you in the chat box so that I can situate you with one of the fellowship directors. Thank you.
So this will be a brief presentation, and we're going to do with Dr. Pang. Dr. Pang did the IRB. So yesterday, as the major person to present, and it's going to be the same day. So I will be the main presenter, and she can chime in anytime. And this is a very good segue to move from authorship to citation. As I mentioned before, our work, all we have as academician is what we produce as academic work. And if people do not cite it, they don't only look at your how many papers you publish. They also look how many citations you have when you are coming to the promotion. So citations are very important. For example, yesterday, Dr. Lee talked about current 6 steps. Well, if you're going to cite that, you should go to Kern's paper and cite the original paper, not the last paper that you have read and that they mentioned that paper. So it is important to cite the people who originated the work, and you can have 2 citations if you want, but it's an important thing to give acknowledgement for the people's work. So we're going to look at review Merit Portal website for best practices, and we're going to take some examples how we will be doing that. We're going to use Dr. Sanchez's paper to show you how some of the citations were done, and whether you need to get a permission, and whether you need to purchase material, and is it necessary to purchase or to cite. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I can see all of you, and I'm going to open the chat and you can put it there as well. So here is the Merit Portal page. And if you go to Merit Portal page, there is a preparing and submitting your manuscript. And under that, there is citations, attributions, and permissions. So if you go there, you will have more information about how to cite. And assume that we went there, this is what you will see. You can have something that, as an author, you created. So you just have to say created by Emine Abala. You can be a non-author, but I can go to our pathologist and say, Rosemary, I need a pathology smear. Do you have this on melanoma? Can you share one picture or image with me? And then I will say created by Dr. Wojcicki. So that's a non-author, but you show acknowledge that you have gotten it from someone else. So if it's web-based, and yes, and then it's copyrighted, and you have to show where you retrieved it. It could be a journal, and that you're going to use an image from a journal, then you need a copyright permission, and there is a form that you fill in Medet portal for that work. There is also Creative Commons. There are images there that you can use. The permission is already been given for you to use. You just have to put the right citation. And if you go to government, public domain and federal government sites, you can also find images from them, and you can retrieve it. This may not be true for state government sites, that you may need their approval. I worked with one of my mentees over last year, and they were some organizations, and we needed to use their logos because they were major contributors to the work that she was doing, and she had no problem getting those permissions. So those are various ways that you can need to have citations. So let's take some examples and look at them. So if we look at, this is Dr. Sanchez's paper, Taking Care of Puerto Rican Patient, and many of presenters use this paper, and I'm going to use some of the images that he had used in this publication. And so here you can see that there's an image, and he used it as a segue to the next slide that he was going to go through, and it's the Capitol building in Puerto Rico, and he got it from Wikipedia. So if you click on this, it shows it Capitolio de Puerto Rico. So he put it here where it was coming from, and even the image, the person who took this image is Brad Clinsmith. So he properly cited this image, and it was underneath his PowerPoint. So that's one way. Then he went to talk about the traditions and genetics and influences on Puerto Rican health. So he add an image here to show the food that is commonly used in Puerto Rico, and he cited again, this is from Creative Commons, and he cited properly again underneath that image. To gather this information, he had used this publication. So he got this one from another website on gastronomy blog, and it is properly cited. The second one is another from website. It is properly cited. I'm sorry, my mouse moves fast. And then the last one, again, it's from another website, and that it's properly cited. So these are various ways, and you can, I will show it to you how you can actually find free access from Google, which I do very often. And Wikipedia have Wikipedia Commons, and under this, there are many sites. It shows where you can find free, I'm sorry, my mouse is crazy. It's going faster than I can talk. Various places in which you can have free media. And now I will stop share and go to Google and show it to you how I do my searches in Google. So if I go, give me a minute. Where did it go? I'm sorry, I have so many things open and now I cannot move to my Google. Maybe I will, oh, it's right here. Okay, so now I will share it with you, sorry. Share. So if I go here and say, for example, melanoma, I was working on preparing something for melanoma. So I go and say search. And then once you do that, you can go for tools and then images. First, you have to go to images. So once you go to images, then you can go to tools. And it says usage rights right here. And then I will go to Creative Commons licenses. So any image that I see here, for example, this one came from Wikipedia. Some of them comes from Flickr, but you're able to use them. And when you open it, you will see all the information, whether it is that you can use it for your site. So you will go there and then it will tell you right here, licensing, that you can use it and you can take this information and add it to your publication or the manuscript that you are trying to put together. So that's the way that you can use Creative Commons. So going back to the slides again, it's here, and let me put it to the presenter. Next, if I go to the next slide. So other times you can draw your own image or you can make your own table. And here, Glenn Garcia was an author on Dr. Sanchez's paper, and he put this timeline for Puerto Rican history together. So it says image created by Glenn Garcia and even the date that they have been produced this image. Then you can go and can you see me, guys? Something happened. Am I sharing it with you? Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay. I'm so sorry. So can you see right now? Okay. So this is was drawn by the author, one of the co-authors on Dr. Sanchez's paper, and Glenn Garcia put it together, and it is properly cited. So if you do not have these images that is created, then you need to have permission. And this is from Medet portal. You complete, you send this to your author, and it will say, I grant permission to use name of the material on the submission to Medet portal. And you have to submit this with your Medet portal submission. And they also need to complete this. Again, I, an authorized agent of the materials, grant permission to the author to reproduce, modify, and distribute the material. So sometimes you need to do that, and sometimes you need to pay for them. So for example, here, there is this work. Before we have sophisticated PowerPoints, we didn't have these icons. So these icons were gotten from Flat Icon to produce this table together. So that it was acknowledged that they were used from Flat Icon. But in order to produce this table here, those two references were used, and they were again properly cited here. So I think this is our own Dr. Lucas, who has been cited here, Leadership Development Program, and another one from AAMC. For me, recently, I'm working with one of our M4 students, and we are trying to submit this work to MEDET portal, and it had a lot of images because it was about toxic alcohol and associated nephropathy. So these were the two images that we could find that, and we couldn't find any from Creative Commons. So I had to purchase and get the permission to use, and they sent me this agreement that they allow me to use it. And I told them where I'm going to use it. I am going to use it for MEDET portal, and the publisher is AAMC. So there are instances that you need to buy, or you can, there are cases that the publisher will give you free permission to use it, and then you can cite them that you have obtained their free permission to use it. So I talk very fast, but these are the main gests that I wanted to really show to you. Anything that you want? Oh, Valerie?
Sorry, could you show us one more time how to like figure out on Wikipedia who made the image so we could cite it?
Okay, that I will show it to you. I think I added to here. So it was here. So if I put it to the presenter view, it will go directly there. So this one. So you see, it came from here, and it will have the information. The author is Puerto Ricensis. It was created or uploaded to this site on December 16, 2018. And then there will be a link for this that you can use. And that link is, let me see, file information. It is this on top of the, you're going to use this, Valerie. Let me pull this so that you can use. You see Commons, Wikipedia. This is your link. This is what you will show on your citation. And you will also add that it came from December 16, 2018. And this is the author. So when we look to Dr. Sanchez's paper again, this is what he put. Images by Puerto Ricensis at English Wikipedia. This is the site, and September 19, 2019, images in public domain. So that's how you would do it. Does that help, Valerie?
Yes, thank you. So we should go to commons.wikimedia.org to find these Creative Commons images, or there's other places we can find the Creative Commons
No, you
images?
can do it from Google, just like I did. So you remember I put melanoma and I went to images. So this was melanoma, or you can tell me something else if you want me to search. So this is all. Then I go to images. And once I go to the images, then I go to tools, and I go to usage rights. And then once I go there, then I go to Creative Commons licenses. Once I go there, almost everything will be free. For example, I can go and choose this one again, or let me choose another one. This one, for example. And then I will say, go to that page. I didn't go to that page. Yeah, right here. Okay. Flickr, or it could be this one. And Flickr has also free. And you will say, you will use this Flickr photos, the title here, you will put it in your citation. And you would say it came from, it should have a name. Now I cannot see the name, but that's how, Milomingo, this is the person who took this picture, March 25th, 2003. And this link, and that will suffice.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Dr. Pang, anything that you would like to add?
No, I think that covered actually a ton of areas that I didn't even know existed for finding some images. My only addition is the one website I've used recently that I really like is Noun Project. It's great if you're looking for some simple cartoons or images in your presentation, but it's actually a really great resource, Noun Project.
Dr. Pang, can you put it into the chat?
Yep, I will.
Thank you. There is one more site that one of my mentees told me. Now I cannot remember. But if I remember, I'll let you guys know. Okay, the Noun Project. Any other questions? If not, we're done, Dr. Sanchez.
Great, excellent. Thank you, Dr. Abali and Dr. Pang. The two things that I've learned in doing all these publications is that right from the beginning, when you start adding photos or images or start considering other people's work, make sure it's open access. Either make sure it's open access, make sure it's not too expensive. So if you need to just pay the $10, you just pay the $10. Or 3, immediately contact the person and get the letter of agreement to use their property.
Yeah, to add that, one thing. So a paper, once you publish, do not belong to you. So do not write to the author on a paper. You have to go into the journal, and there should be a way which says permission. You go there and you get the permission from the journal if it's a picture from a journal.
And then the other thing I would add is just create your own. Take your own pictures of you and a mentee, take pictures of offices. You know, that way, if it's your own photo, you have more control, or if it's your own table or creation. So right from the beginning, try your best to own whatever you're using. The worst case situation, and it happens, please avoid what I'm about to say. You start going through Google, you love pictures, you start grabbing pictures from everywhere, you have a beautiful presentation and you can't use it because it belongs to other people. That is the kiss of death in submitting something to Medit Portal, because you have to balance between having something graphically beautiful with understanding that Medit Portal is not going to get into a lawsuit because you find something visually attractive. Playing the game is finding materials you can actually use. I say this because I reject submissions all the time. And people will argue with me. Well, I don't understand why I can't use this image. It's the best image. You can't use it because you don't own it.
Yes.
It doesn't belong to you. So please, please avoid this. Any questions about this?
I have one comment to add. So sometimes, of course, like the histology image that I show you, I cannot create. But if there is a table, or if there is a graphic that you see, don't replicate it, but you can make it your own. For example, I don't know, I will give you an example for, because I'm basic science, RAS signaling, okay, how cancer happens. So you can find something and you use bubbles instead of triangles. You do the picture not sideways, but you can do it this way, or make it your own. Use it as an example to develop, so it's not a complete replica, but you can change it, and then you don't have to ask for permission.